Good morning, everyone. My name is Daphne Cook, and we are coming to you live from MCC North Express. I want to thank you for joining us today for the second part of our three-part series, Thriving During Uncertainty. So today we're going to talk about redesigning the physical space. So one thing we all know for sure, normal looks different in the COVID-19 world. And facilities are going to play a key role in what that looks like. As we prepare to come back, and especially here, right here in Omaha, students are coming back to the classroom. There are measures and protocols that must be taken to make sure that students stay safe. So joining us today, we have some very special subject matter experts. But before we begin, I just want to say if you have any questions about anything, go ahead and drop those, whether it's via Zoom or in the live text. We do have someone monitoring that, and we have saved some time for questions at the end. So if we could start, if you would introduce yourself and what you do at AOI.
All right. Do you want to go first?
My name is Chris Hill, and I'm president of the company. We are a commercial general contractor, office furniture company, and then we have a pre-engineered, pre-manufactured wall system that we sell as well. So we have offices in Omaha and Lincoln, and so construction, design, furniture, space planning, and being able to drive culture through the space and help customers and help businesses develop great environments for their people.
And I'm Krista Prohaska. I am the design manager at AOI over the furniture division. And so I help oversee the solutions we're creating for our clients as they're moving back into their offices mid-COVID. So.
And so you have around 100 employees,
Yep.
and most of your employees are back on site.
So half of our employees are on job sites scattered throughout the community. So those are carpenters, superintendents, furniture installers, and about half of our employees are in the office. And we are on what we call level 1. So we were on level 2, which means don't come in. We don't want you in unless you absolutely have to be here, but we prefer you not come in. We moved to a level 1, which is you can come in whenever you want, just follow the protocols. So it took us a little while to get those protocols in place and figure out what we needed to do to create a safe environment so people could come in when they wanted.
So as I was looking to this and doing a little bit of research about best practices when it comes to redesigning, one thing that I saw is really it's a multifaceted, phased approach looking to guidance and regulations from a variety of organizations, CDC, WHO, Employment Commission, OPEC, OSHA, the White House. So where do you start with all these different organizations providing information which may or may not agree with each other?
Right. So, we take a lot of our information. We have a lot of great vendors we work with who put a lot of information out there, who they kind of take the information from the CDC, from the WHO, from their state and local, and they compile it into a set of guides. And so that's really what we're looking towards is kind of that general message from the CDC, from a spatial aspect, from density aspect, from cleanliness, cleaning, overall culture really is what it boils down to, is what the culture for each individual office, what they need to do to return safely to the office.
So it sounds like you do take these, you take this pretty seriously because we're talking about a health issue here,
Right.
and it's not based upon feelings. So how do you convey that to your staff, and how do you convey that to customers?
Well, I think again, it's a cultural shift, and it starts from the top down. And I think you really have to have the message come down from management on what the new normal is going to be for your company, for your space. And there is a lot of change. There's a lot of the new normal. And I think you just have to be mindful of that, be respectful of that. There's so much change, so many different processes and procedures in the wake of this. And you're not going to remember everything from day one, when you first come into the office, that, oh my gosh, I can only now sit in this section, or I can only go down this hallway. And you're going to forget that. So it's being mindful, being respectful, just, hey, remember, we're not supposed to go this way, and just be kind to everybody. So it's a process.
So Krista, you had mentioned culture. Chris, I'm wondering for you, in your position as president, how do you begin to adapt this guidance from these organizations and weave that into your culture?
We approached it from a couple of different things that we did. One is we determined our source. What were we going to use as guidance? So whether that's CDC or our manufacturer partners or the We Rise program that the chamber put out, we distributed that information. So particularly to our leadership team, and made sure that everybody had access to that and could follow along as well. It wasn't just us saying it. These are the sources that we're following, and so that gave that extra credibility, and it was laid out really well and felt like something that we could trust and use. Some of the best stuff out there, we felt like we had credible information. We put together a task force that covered, so we have multiple departments and various roles and a leadership team as well. So bringing people from each one of those groups together, getting our leaders involved, laying it out there, this is what we need to do, and then having different people that were assigned with different elements or tasks. So we had somebody who was responsible for tell us what the protocols are that we need to have in our office from a cleaning standpoint. Tell us what we need to do from a health survey standpoint. Tell us what we need to do from a mask standpoint. Help us understand what we need to do, and then we could execute. Krista was accountable or responsible for, is our space okay? Do we need to make changes in our space? So she and team went through and looked at where do we have enough distance and where do we not, and what changes do we need to make? And so it really was a team initiative. So there wasn't one person doing all of the heavy lifting. It was a whole group of people that were deployed, and then also they could hear questions from their departments and answer those questions because they were in the know. It wasn't just coming down from on high. It was a whole team of people that were working together to figure out what we needed to do. They were charged and deployed with that assignment, I guess.
Krista, can you talk a little bit about being a part of that task force, walking through the space, and then some of those changes that you eventually made?
Right, sure. So as Chris said, on this task force, a big part of it first was just seeing the information coming in, what our guidelines were going to be, what we needed to be aware of. And so then taking those guidelines, taking a look at our plan as it stood, and really determining where our hot spots were, or where our pinch points, our possible challenges were going to be. And we're lucky in our space that we do have a large environment. And so honestly, we didn't have that many crucial areas, but we did have some where looking back at it was like, okay, this area we're gonna have to readdress. They're too close. There's not enough division between them. They're not facing the right way. They're right next to a major walkway. There's going to be too much traffic. And so those are different things that we were looking at. And once you address those, finding where your hot spots are going to be, then determining what scenarios you can put in play to fix that. Is it just a simple reorientating the individual sitting in that desk? So now, rather than facing towards the person across from them, they're now both facing in the same direction. Now, if you don't have that ability to restructure, can you somehow add additional screening so that there's more division between them? Then we started looking at signage with our marketing department, determining, okay, this is a really high traffic area next to this department. Can we redirect this traffic so it's not coming right next to them? Rather than worrying about putting up screens or rearranging, maybe we just redirect. And so it's really this holistic approach of looking at it from every angle to really restructure. And then at the end of the day, cleanliness. I mean, because you can rearrange, you can put up screens, but at the end of the day, if you're not going back and wiping down those screens, wiping down the desks, and say, especially if you have a multi-shift or like a hoteling situation, if you have somebody else coming to work at that same desk and you're not wiping it down, it defeats the purpose of all of it. So that, first and foremost, going back to that safety and well-being, the cleanliness, even looking at your air system and, you know, getting proper air circulation. There really is this all-encompassing holistic approach.
It sounds like it is a lot of information. And so I would imagine that information has to be reinforced with signage.
Yes.
So what type of signage do you have around the office and maybe on work sites too to reinforce the messages that you're giving?
Do you want to address that one?
We realized pretty early on that it is very complex. And we needed to deploy quickly so that we could give people the opportunity to be back in. We had people that wanted to be back in for a variety of reasons. And so we felt like we wanted to be able to move through all of that very quickly. And just telling somebody something, you're not going to remember all of it. You're not going to remember which seat you can sit in the conference room, or which walkway you can go down versus the ones that you shouldn't go down, and how to use the break room if we don't have visuals that remind people of those things or provide some direction along those things. I think I realize I'm not going to remember all this. So we decided this is about behavior modification. We have to change our behaviors, and we have to have these reminders that can't, as soon as I walk out of my office or as I'm walking across the building, there are these reminders, oh shoot, I got to get my mask, or oh, I'm not supposed to walk this way, or I've got to sign in and make sure I fill out the health form. And so they're all over the place. But our marketing team developed signage and visuals that don't look ominous. It looks like it fits within the space, because our space is we still have customers that come in. We are a working showroom. And so we didn't want it to look, we wanted it all to fit in, and we wanted it to represent and reflect who we are as a company. And so they did a great job of putting some things together. And I don't sit in that chair because there's a placemat that says, it tells me not to sit there. Or there's this little, near Krista where she sits, there's this stop sign that basically is saying, don't walk down this aisle if you're trying to get through. And so it just these little reminders that are all over the building that help us change our behaviors.
And I think too, one of the things you mentioned is that the reminders don't have to be so ominous. So I've seen, at our location, we have tape, and if it's red tape, then that's a place that you don't sit. But if it's not, then you can sit there. And I've been to restaurants too, where one restaurant I went to had a plant in the different at the different tables that you're not supposed to sit at. So it can be kind of fun. It doesn't have to be ominous. It's just a shift, that behavior modification that you were mentioning.
We also, particularly in the furniture side of our business, having a aesthetically pleasing, warm, inviting, fun, visually dynamic environment is important to how we feel about being at work. And we also do a lot of work inside occupied environments, and so we're very conscientious of the impact of our presence. And so for me personally, it was fun to watch our team solve these issues in really creative ways that made the space still look beautiful and intentional. So even the hand sanitizer bottles that are all over the place, like they're everywhere. It's not a distraction because they're so nice. They're just these beautiful little, that kind of fit within the decor hand sanitizers, and the team, they went to great lengths to bring things in and implement things that fit within a quality, well-designed space. And so it was really cool to see all of that happen. And then there's a little bit of humor that's woven in there as well with some of the signs that we put up regarding wearing masks and kind of bringing some levity to what is a difficult thing to do sometimes, wearing those masks. And in our building, you don't have to wear them when you're at your desk because we've got that distancing accommodated. But if you're up walking through the space, you do need to wear them. Some people wear them all day. And so bringing some levity to somewhat of a difficult circumstance that we're working under, I was really happy with how the team approached some of those things.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, kind of getting into the nitty gritty. So some of the changes you made, you have the visuals, you have the signage, you have one way in, one way out, looking at spacing, but along with the behavior modification, it sounds like maybe a little bit of thought modification, because you have employees who want it to come back to work right away. And so in order to do that, you had to create this safe working environment for them to do so.
We have, I think like most companies, like most organizations, we have the whole spectrum where we have people who are still very nervous and we're worried, is it a safe environment? And we have people that wanted to be back and who in some cases never fully left. We have some people that just, that's their space and where they're most productive. So we tried really hard to help those that are a little more nervous to feel safe, and I think the signage in some cases gave them peace of mind that, okay, if we're all following the rules, if everybody's following the rules, then I'm good. I can come back and I can feel safe being back because we're doing what the recommendations are saying, and so that it created a sense of safety. And then for those that are a little less concerned, there's options for them as well, where we, if you're sitting at your desk, you don't need to wear the mask. So kind of covering all, that whole spectrum and respecting that spectrum and trying to figure out how do we create health and safety, what kind of things do we need to put in place so that everyone can feel comfortable and knows how to be productive and engaged and part of the team.
So you made a lot of changes in the workspace, but how did you address the places where people like to congregate? Like they like to walk around, go to the break room, hang out, chat a little bit about whatever may be in the news currently. And so how did you address those collaborative spaces and really those spaces where people just want to connect with the people they're working with?
Sure. So one of the main areas would be your conferencing, your meeting spaces. And so after we did the initial kind of analysis of our space, determining that the density of those was too high. So we had come up with the marketing department to create these little place cards that we put right outside of our conference rooms that indicate the maximum occupancy, and then showing ideally where you need to sit to maintain social distancing. And so just kind of a nice reminder as you're walking in, you can see, oh, okay, well, we need 6 people, but we can only fit 4. So we're gonna have to find someplace else to have this meeting, or somebody's gonna have to log in from their desk instead. In the conference rooms, also just being mindful that maybe we can't bring the coffee in there as much, or have the food in there, which for us, that was a big change because we're foodies and we like
to party.
Yeah, we like to enjoy that. So, trying to curtail that or find different ways around it. And then in our break room, we did decrease the amount of chairs, spaced our tables out more. For a period of time, we were not making coffee. It was kind of, you had to bring in your own, keep it at your desk if you did bring it in. But the hard thing really for us, being a showroom, we still wanted to show product. We need to show product. And so in the conference rooms, I know some offices, some businesses, they're taking the chairs out of that. But for us, it was, well, we still need to show that product. And so finding another way around that was, as Chris alluded to, those placemats of just saying, here's your allocated safe space to sit, which also goes back to the occupancy, showing where the 4 people could sit in that particular conference room. And just spacing out where you can. Again, in our space, we have the luxury of room to spread more, but maybe instead of in your collaborative high top Parsons table, you know, having 8 chairs around it, maybe you do have to take that back and you only have, you know, 2 or 3 chairs around it. You know, your big sofas and your lounge chairs, you know, instead of having them all in this small grouping, you have to space them out or redistribute them differently throughout your space. So it's really just creating these different, in your mind, scenarios of how can we redirect, displace, and rearrange these groupings to still serve our space.
Culturally, for your organization, did you kind of have to redefine fun or what it looks like? A lot of times there's that one person who always brings in donuts or you know, so did you have to kind of redefine, well, what does it look like? How can we keep everyone safe and still maintain fun?
I think one of the greatest benefits to being able to wear masks is it gives us a lot more freedom. We're still so we can do a lot more with those, with everybody wearing those, than if we weren't doing that. So it creates a sense of safety. The fun piece is something that we're kind of working on right now. So we've got a every year we put together a team of people, and we call it our AOI Gives team. And they pick a nonprofit organization in the community that we can all help. So we volunteer or we raise money for this organization. And we weren't going to do it this year because COVID, and just didn't think that we could pull it off. And we recognized that there was this big void because our space is designed, and I noticed this more than ever through COVID, our space is designed to intentionally bring people together. You just find yourself, you know, the different settings that we have, you just find yourself very comfortable having a conversation with other people or gathering or working through something together. We have space all over the building for people to be able to do that in teams, small groups, or larger groups. And so we weren't able to do that, which was a huge culture issue for us. And it was palatable, and people were saying it. It doesn't feel like us. I'm having a hard time because this isn't who we are. I wanted to work here because of this thing that we do that brings us all together. And so we decided to go ahead and do the AOI Gives team and charge them with, I don't know how you're going to do it, but we need it this year more than ever. See what you can do. And if it doesn't work out, great, but if you can figure out how to bring our people together. And so they actually ended up putting together a golf outing, and we were outside. And if you're within 6 feet, you wore a mask. But we did that on Friday, and it was fantastic. It was such a great event. And it was the first time since COVID that we had that many people come together. I heard yesterday, there's a couple people in our organization that I would consider our fun people, and they just know how to, you know, they'll put the bags tournaments together, or they do different things with our teams throughout the year. And so they have an idea. We have our families bring in their trick-or-treaters for Halloween every year, and so employees can lay out candy and the kids can go trick-or-treat in their costumes. And so yesterday they said, we've got an idea. We know how we can do our Halloween trick-or-treating event and still be safe. So they're working on that.
We'd all like to hear this.
Yeah. And they're just going to do it so that the kids can come through, and it's individual stuff, so they aren't sticking their hands in there, and they're going to have them kind of walk through a different way, and they feel like they figured out how to make that a safe event, but we don't have to put that on hold. And so I think it's just rethinking the things that you know, I love that we've recognized that this is part of who we are, and we've got to figure it out. And I love that we have people that are willing to tackle it and solve it. So I'm looking forward to see what else we can do along those lines.
It sounds like staff plays such a critical role in just the success and adaptation of the protocols and the guidelines and the sanitation and the hygiene.
I think they have to. I mean, it goes back to the culture. And if you're really going to have the success of implementing these new processes and procedures and everything, by having more people involved in that, I think it makes it more acceptable across the corporation or your office space. You know, by having the input from the different departments, from, you know, the different individuals, there's more of that buy-in of, you know, okay, like we're all in this together. We're going to figure this out. We're going to find ways around this. We're going to find new ways of doing this. But, you know, we're doing it together. It's not just this mandate coming down from management. It's working together collectively to figure out what's going to work for the company and for the culture of your company.
Well, the fact that you charge them with, okay, how do we do this? I don't know how we're going to do this, but how do we do this?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it really empowering employees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What kind of strategies do you have when you're looking at staff for connecting to staff? You mentioned you have most of your staff are working, but not all. You have some that are nervous. So how do you stay connected to the staff that aren't on site, that may be missing that fun piece of AOI that the staff has come to really treasure?
Well, we had, I know initially we had this virtual lunchroom through Teams that we were using, and it was just kind of a fun place to just post different memes, you know, post jokes, or just, you know, talk about just random stuff. It was kind of your water cooler moment, because you're not there in the office to congregate around the break room or that. So we had this virtual lunchroom that we had set up that was really fun, and we had once a week virtual calls where anybody in the company could log in, and sometimes they were doing just these kind of fun games and question and answer things on the call. So just finding different ways to do that from a team aspect. And I know we had a couple new employees start during this, which was a challenge. You know, how do you onboard and train, you know, new employees? And, you know, like I like to talk, you just almost have to over communicate. You know, reach out more often, touch points more often, call on the phone, virtual call, email more. It's, you know, you can't see them virtually to really talk, or can't see them in person to talk. So you almost have to make that connection more frequently to really, you know, let them know you're there for them. You know, ask them, how are you doing? What can I do to help you? Just let them know that they're not alone, sitting in their home office on an island by themselves. You know, that they're still going to get the support from their team, from their staff, from their superiors. So.
I know one of the things that we did here, so we have staff that are just the very first staff that come in the morning, and so we have this little meeting every morning and just kind of talk and shoot the breeze before we start our day. So as we shifted to working remotely, we still had that. We still started off our day that way, so just being very intentional to make that connection, because it is easy to feel as if you're on an island all by yourself.
Right.
If that connection isn't being made.
Mm-hmm.
So we have been in this environment for what is it, 6 months now? I mean, is it since March? So it's about 6 months now. So what do you see from your professional estimation are some of the trends that might be here to stay?
Well, you know, there's still a lot we're figuring out. Still a lot we're learning, you know, on the fly about this, and there's so much still up in the air. But some of the things we are starting to see is this shift. You know, before COVID, there was always this struggle of work-life balance. Well, COVID's kind of forced our hand a little bit of forcing everybody home, and so you're seeing more people enjoying that, being at home and feeling like their work-life balance has really increased. And so going forward, a lot of companies are now kind of looking, analyzing, you know, can we do this long term? Maybe not for everybody, but maybe there's certain departments or individuals who can do that, and trying to find that balance. Also, you know, other companies, they're finding that the home office is almost becoming that focal point, that heads down work. So, okay, I'm gonna go home, you know, work for the next day or two, really crank some stuff out. But then the office is almost becoming just overall this collaborative touch point, go talk to people, kind of crank out, generate some ideas, but then go back home, focus in, do your production. So it's almost the shift point where in the office before you had individual focus rooms or quiet rooms. Well, now that quiet room is almost becoming the house, your home office. And so that's one thing that we're starting to see more of. Does that kind of play out long term? Again, it's kind of up in the air. We're still learning. I mean, there's a lot of companies who they're not even ready to go back yet, and it might be another 6-9 months before they are there and ready to go back. So who knows what it'll look like in 9 months? Maybe it'll be different even by then. So it's really just being flexible and trying to determine the best course for your office, for your culture, at the point you as a company are ready to go back.
Chris, I think you had mentioned something that I love to copy and say because I think it's so brilliant. You had said it's kind of like you're writing a book as you go along that's never been written before.
Yeah, I heard somebody say one time that we are all, there's this person, this author that's writing the book, and they're handing us the pages, and they're not the final draft, and so we're getting the pages and we're all reading them at the same time and trying to interpret what does this mean and how do we do this, and then here comes the edit, and so it's another page, and none of us have ever done, no one has done this before. And I think there's comfort in the fact that this isn't something that's just happening to me or to us. This is happening to all of us, and we can learn a lot from each other. A lot of our ideas and a lot of things that we've implemented have come from other organizations, and who are willing to share what they're doing. And our space is a space that people can come in and kind of see what we're doing, and we've had great feedback. We thought everybody was doing the same thing, and so having customers come in or other companies come in and just kind of walk through our space and see what we're doing, and then they're sharing their ideas and things that they've implemented and how they're solving some of these new business issues. And I think it's probably one of the biggest collaborative efforts in the business community ever, because we're all doing this together and all trying to figure it out.
It's almost kind of like if you think about back after 9/11, there was such a huge push for safety and security. And the pendulum just swung so far over where everybody was just overly concerned, and rightfully so. And then as you kind of distance yourself, the pendulum just kind of centered itself back. You didn't go all the way back to the other side. You just kind of nestled into the middle. And I think that's similar with this. Right now we're so concerned about safety, cleanliness, distancing, and as we get further away from this, where do we finally settle? Are we going to go back exactly the way we were? Probably not, but it's figuring out where the new comfort zone is. Where do we settle in? And so it might take us a little while to get there and figure out what that is.
As it's constantly evolving.
Right.
There's some great, it's whether they stick or not, whether companies incorporate them or not, there's some fantastic innovations happening right now. Microbial fabrics and things that are happening with ultraviolet light to minimize or eliminate the spread of disease in the air, and just different things. All these different industries are trying to solve this issue, and it really is if we didn't have to deal with the hardship and the inconvenience of it all, and some of the scariness of it all, it's pretty remarkable effort, and I think it's America at its best. The innovations that are coming out are fantastic.
I would say too, one of the best things that I've seen come out of COVID-19 is just this burst of creativity and innovation, because you have to figure out how to make this work. If this is the environment, then how do we operate in this environment?
Right.
Yeah, there's always a silver lining, right? And we were starting some of our meetings with, because it can really weigh on people. It's just hard. You have to learn how to do everything different. You don't get to see your friends at work or work like you used to. And so we used to start some of our meetings with, okay, what really sucks about this? And what's the silver lining? Is there a silver lining here? And it was kind of cool to hear different people say, well, if there was a silver lining, I like that this is happening. So there's always, a bright side of things, I think.
Oh, definitely. And focusing on that bright side, I think, helps keep the correct frame of mind.
Yeah.
So as you mentioned, Krista, there are businesses, organizations all over the country that are in various states of returning. So how does an organization really know that they are ready to have employees come back on site?
I think it's just reaching out to your employees and really gauging their comfort level. I mean, everybody is at different levels of comfort throughout this whole thing. And so I think just really having those conversations, there's a lot of great surveys out there that you can submit to your workforce and, really get an idea of, how comfortable are you with coming in? How often would you feel comfortable coming in? Also, what's your home life? Where are your kids? Are your kids in school? Are they not in school? Do we need to be mindful of that as you come back into the office? What's your technology set up at home? So, can you work from home? Do we need to help you get something set up? So it's really kind of figuring out the lay of the land and where your employees' comfort and capabilities are, and if they're ready to come in as a workforce. And then kind of once you gauge that, then looking at your space. Okay, so here we have, here's our workforce. We're going to have this percentage that feels comfortable coming in right now. So how much of our space, what sections of our space do we need to start getting ready? How do we allocate? How do we shift? How do we rearrange to get the space ready? But really, I think it's just, again, questioning, figuring out where your employees stand and how comfortable they are and ready they are to come in.
So this is an environment that many have never experienced before. So as you're looking to employees returning to the workspace, are there some special considerations that maybe you would not had to think about before just due to this environment?
Related to the space?
Well,
or
just related
overall?
to just overall, because we haven't had a situation before where schools were closed.
That's probably the big one.
Yeah.
I think we're fortunate that we have the expertise on staff and we've got the resources and the space to be able to create a healthy and safe environment for people to come back in. But what we can't do is solve the issue with schools. So if the schools aren't open or if they're open part-time, we've got a lot of parents of young children who weren't sure what they were going to do at first. And so in addition to figuring out what we were going to do to get our work done and serve our clients, we found ourselves working with some of our families to figure out how we could create stability for them or provide resources or point people in the right direction so that, or leveraging programs like Families First, or, how can we create stability or help support this family as they work through a really difficult situation. And it happened right when I thought it felt like we were starting to get back to a new normal. I know just, okay, we have a safe environment, healthy environment, everybody can come back to work if they'd like. So it felt like we were on our way to not having to talk about COVID. And then all of a sudden realized that some of the schools weren't going to open, or they were only going to open part-time. And that created a whole new distraction or issue to resolve for our business, because some of these folks, they're very important to our business. They're critical, and so not working with them, I think, would be a disservice to them and to our organization. So that was not anticipated, and something that we're still working through.
Would you say that as an organization or to other organizations that this situation requires a bit more flexibility?
I think that is if there were any word that we would be putting out there to our customers or people that we do business with, our biggest, the word of the day is flexibility. Flexibility when it comes to how people are working, what the space looks like, things that we're doing now versus what we may need to do 2 months from now or 6 months. It's all about flexibility. And I think We did an office renovation and expansion 5 years ago, maybe. Was it
About
5?
six.
6. And the changes that we made back then, the benefit of those changes, because we did build a flexible space, that has helped through this process in being able to accommodate the changes that we're going through. Our space is very flexible. And so yeah, flexible with people, flexible with families, flexible in, a lot of companies are de-densifying. So they have their people are working in shifts. And so being flexible when it comes to that, we've got a couple of positions who've said, I'm going to come in on these days and this person's going to come in on these days. So there's always somebody there, but allowing them the flexibility to solve that issue and figure out how to do that, that's the buzzword, in my opinion.
Well, we did say that we were going to save some time for questions at the end, so I have some questions for you. And so just answer on who you think would be the best person to answer. How do you encourage your employees to take sanitation and their own cleaning routine seriously?
We have, again, I think it's this kind of study in behavior, like what changes behaviors. We have hand sanitizer all over the building, and everyone has it at their desks. So it's so convenient, and it's kind of fun to watch. Not fun, I guess it's not fun. It's interesting to watch, if we're in a meeting, we just find ourselves hitting that pump and doing this on a regular, it's just now, that has become a habit. So using that hand sanitizer has become a habit. Wiping down spaces after we use them. We have this spray and these wipes all over the building, again, wherever there's a collaborative area. So it's just very convenient, and it's sitting right there, and you just find yourself, like we clean up after ourselves. If we use the refrigerator, or we use the coffee pot, or we're in a conference room, it's almost subconscious to some extent. We just find ourselves doing this, and I don't know why. I think it's just very convenient, and we know. I think we know also, we set up that goal, nobody gets sick, which is, initially we're like, okay, what is it going to take to make sure that nobody here catches COVID because of something we did or didn't do? And I think that goes to motivation. What's the motivator to change the behavior or to develop new habits? And the motivator is, we want to be able to keep working. We want to be able to hit our goals. We want to be able to see each other. And if we're going to be able to do all those things, these are the behaviors that we have to adopt.
And I think really quickly to that, I think it goes back to the culture though too. Having a culture, because it is a new process you have to learn. And as I alluded to earlier, you're not going to remember everything. So I think it's having that mindset within that culture. It's okay to remind somebody like, oh, hey, you were just in that conference room, do you mind cleaning it up? And knowing that that's okay, but doing it in a mindful, respectful way to your other employees, because the end game, as Chris said, you don't want to get sick. So you don't want to be the one responsible for not cleaning it and somebody gets sick. So we're all in this together. We're all, working towards the same goal. So let's help each other, remind each other. So we're all doing the same thing.
Well, you mentioned some of your protocols, the hand sanitizer, the cleaning up a space after you use it. We have some of those same protocols. Even how we clean is one of our protocols, questions we ask ourselves if we're feeling a certain way. So how did you determine what protocols to implement at your organization?
I think a lot of it just went back to the guidelines of, what the CDC was putting out, kind of what was being put out on a local level from the local health departments, programs like the Chamber had, just really taking the information that was available and bringing it in, making it part of our new process, our new normal for our office. And I think that's really all you can do is just, take the information that's there, that's available, and figure out how you can implement that into your office procedures and your day-to-day business routine. It just becomes, you come in and you make coffee every morning. Well, okay, then you just add on, I gotta wipe this down when I'm done. It's just kind of that little additional extra that you now have to do. So
I think you combine those guidelines with a little bit of, I'm gonna call it common sense maybe. It's like, if we have the ability to wipe it down, we're probably okay. Or you know, we feel like we've struck the right balance, and I think that is because we've had a group of people working on it where we can reason some things out. Do we need to take everybody's temperature when they come in the door every day? No, we don't feel like we need to do that. We're going to put a thermometer that people can use. They use a tissue, they pick it up, they take their own temperature if they need to. We didn't feel like there's some things some other companies are doing, and I understand why they need to do them. But in our environment and the size that we are, we felt like we could do some things in a way that made the program effective, but worked for us. You know, we didn't want our person at the front desk taking everybody's temperature and having it announce what the temperature. There's all kinds. There's some stuff going on out there that is interesting as well. We wanted to protect people's privacy, but create an environment that's somewhat based on the honor system, but creates enough structure that you know, like with the masks and other things that you can tell if people are following the behavior or adapting to those behaviors.
Another question for you. How transparent do you expect employees to be about their activities or potential exposures outside of work?
So what we have asked employees to do is if they, so we have a health questionnaire, and there's some prompts on there asking people, have you been exposed to somebody who's waiting for a test? Are you waiting for a test? Have you been out of the state? There's different questions that they ask that help us determine if there is an issue. We have a person that's designated as if you think you may have been exposed, even if you think you have, this is the person that you would contact and say, my daycare, this happened, or I had somebody at my house and they're waiting for a test, or they've tested positive. So this person can reason it out with them, or point them to, DHHS has a hotline that's they're great, they've been awesome. And so the individual can walk through their circumstances, and DHHS can say, you need to quarantine, or nope, you're fine, just watch for symptoms, take your temperature, or nope, no issues, you're fine, or you need to go get a test. And so we're using that. We have the ability and will, if necessary, do contact tracing. So we have logs of everywhere I go, I'm signing in. If it's an AOI job site or an AOI facility, I'm signing in for that date. So if somebody that was there at the same time ends up having to get a test or thinks that they may have been exposed, this point of contact will let me know, hey, there's an issue, here's what's going on. So that's an important part of our process as well. And we have to be able to do that for our customers. If we've got an employee who is in a building and there's a potential that they may have COVID, we've got to let people know, and it's a top priority if that's the situation. We've had a few close calls. We've had some people that did have COVID. They didn't get it from work. They got it outside of work, and they let us know, and then we kind of watched that to see if we needed to let other people know. But we're balancing transparency and notification with privacy. And I think we've done a good job of that. You know, we want to maintain people's privacy and not have it be something weird that happens for people. We want them to trust that they can tell us what's going on.
Many employees are in flux because they're halfway at home, halfway at the office. It's becoming pretty common now. So can you give us some home office basics, like so that you can be productive at home? So one of the things that I first learned was my hard wooden dining room chair that I sit in for 20 minutes to eat dinner is not an effective work tool to work from, 8 hours a day.
Right. And that's probably one of the first things you need to be aware of is having a ergonomic chair that's going to support your stature as you're sitting at your desk for, a full day of work. You think about how your office chair supports you, supports your back, supports your legs as you're sitting there with, the different technology that's there. You're not going to find that in a dining room chair or a club chair, lounge chair in your living room. It's, again, not going to have the same support. So not to say you can't sit in your living room and work on your sofa for an hour or so, but again, for 8 hours, you want to have a chair that's going to support you, be able to move with you as you're working in the different postures at your desk. Having either a monitor arm, I know at our office we were allowing some people to take monitor arms home with them if they needed that, but just some way to get your monitor at the appropriate height. If at home, if that is just, a riser or a stack of books, just whatever it is, so you're not putting the strain on your neck because you have this monitor that's at this weird angle and all of a sudden your neck is hurting. So again, it's just having the correct setup, ergonomically speaking, so your posture as you're sitting there working is adequate, but also just proper lighting. If you can't be by a window, do you have a lamp there? Just something that's going to be relaxing. It's not going to be stressful, someplace quiet. So the dining room may not be the best bet if that's Grand Central Station in your house.
It turned out I had to reevaluate that situation.
Because talking about kids being home, some people don't have their kids in school. They're still virtually learning. So maybe having all of you sit at the table, your kids on one end in a meeting and you at the other isn't maybe the greatest. So while it certainly may help you, keep your kids in line when they're on their call, all day long, again, may not be the best area to sit for an entire day of work.
Daphne, that's something that we're hearing a lot more. People are starting to have some real issues and making trips to the chiropractor and not realizing how important a really good chair is, especially if you're going to do 8 hours of work at home.
Right.
And I think we'll see more and more of that. So if nothing else, make sure you have a really good chair.
It is the best investment.
Yeah.
But Christy, you mentioned lighting. How do you even know you have the right lighting? I mean, I suppose if you're not squinting, but how do you know that you have the right lighting?
You're going to notice strain, wear on your eyes. If you're getting your 8-hour day, if you're getting halfway through the day and your eyes are just getting tired, dried out possibly, if you're squinting a lot, noticing you might have a lighting issue. Some of that maybe you can address just by fixing. If you're working at a different monitor, maybe you just need to adjust some of the lighting, contrast, brightness on your monitor itself. But usually your home is a bit darker than your office. And so you're now viewing this monitor in a much darker environment. You get a much higher contrast, which for some individuals may be really stressful on their eyes. So putting a lamp there or, adjusting if you can the amount of light coming out of your light fixture, switching your bulbs out, make it a little bit lighter so there's not as much contrast. It's going to help alleviate some of that wear and tear. But also reminding, and you'd have to do this in the office anyway, but taking breaks. Make sure you take breaks, walk away from your computer, for 5-10 minutes every so often.
Well, I have a list here of some tips for creating the perfect home office and behaviors, and I wanted to get your professional opinions about it. So you mentioned taking breaks, so setting a schedule helps with productivity. Another tip is wearing pants. So where do you stand on the wearing pants?
Big believers in pants.
Yep.
Okay.
Pants are important.
Support pants.
Never know.
Setting daily goals.
Yep, I think that's, right. I think sometimes at home you may have more distractions, so I think having those goals set out to keep you on task every day.
And how do you deal with those distractions at home? What tips do you have for that?
Well,
what have you heard from your employees?
Well, she doesn't work in our office, but this one individual who I've done several webinars with, her way to get away from distractions is when she was doing Zoom calls, she would sit in her closet, away from her kids, away from her dog, away from her husband. It was quiet, and she knew she would not be distracted. So, I'm not saying that's for everybody, but as I said earlier, it's just finding the dining table may not be it. again, the
It was
kitchen may
not.
not be it.
That lasted for about a good 48 hours.
Yeah, finding a quieter part of your house that you're not going to be distracted. And then again, I'm not saying you can't for periods of time work at that dining room or work in your living room, but you're going to want someplace quiet where you can really focus.
Yeah, a lot of adjustments over the 6 months. So we talked about wearing pants, but what about just getting dressed in general? Do you dress for work when you're at home?
I think
Go ahead.
No, you go.
I am not a work from home person. There are some of us out there as well. I find I'm way more engaged and way more productive. I have a yellow lab that is not cooperative when it comes to working from home, and neighbors, and all kinds of. And Amazon.com is coming, and so it's not as productive for me. The other thing that I heard, and that's one of the reasons that I'm glad we were able to accommodate this safe office environment, because we have quite a few people who they need to be at the office. They're more productive there. But one thing I did hear recently that I thought was so good is, and I think it was a meme or a comedian said it, not every call needs to be visual. Remember before Zoom when we just had conference calls? Well, it turns out those are really effective, and you can have a really good conference call and you don't need to be looking at yourself and everybody else the whole time, because that is distracting, because there's a lot of visuals and things coming into view, and it doesn't always have to be a visual call.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, a question that I had for you is AOI has just received a lot of attention lately. You're in the Midlands Business Journal right now for just your approach to the pandemic and how you've addressed it with your staff and employees. And why do you think that your approach has been so successful for you, or that you've received this recognition?
We have really talented people. We have great staff. We've got great partners. The different manufacturers that we represent, they're international organizations who are dealing with some of these things. They're already in Hong Kong, and they know how Hong Kong has dealt with these things and what's working and not working. Or it affords us insight and access to what organizations are doing across the country and across the world. So having that resource has been fantastic. But really, it's about the people that can work together to figure it out. I think that's the whole key.
I think it really is just having that collaborative, team approach. We're all in this together. We need to find solutions. Going back to what you had said earlier, it's like, I don't know how you're going to do it. Just but we got to figure it out. So, but empowering your people to help come up with those solutions, I think for us has been huge. But it speaks to our culture really, and how we're set up.
Well, you guys have been absolutely amazing. I'm so glad you were able to be with us here today. I do have one more question for you. What advice do you have for businesses and organizations who are doing long-term strategic planning in a situation that is constantly evolving, changing even day to day? So how do you approach that?
I have learned some things along the way by asking questions and listening, particularly to some of our people, and sometimes you have to tell me more, help me understand, why is that an issue? How can we solve it? Just having those one-on-one conversations with people to see where they're at and what they really want, and what they need. And then I think also just that flexibility piece. We're still all in business to accomplish certain business objectives, and so is it working? Is what we're doing right now working? So if it's not, bring the team together and figure out, okay, how do we get to this goal? What do we need to do? How can we? Do we need to adjust, or are we good? And then just that flexibility piece. I wouldn't make any major changes anytime soon. I would kind of focus on health and safety, because that also demonstrates to employees that you care about them, and it's not political, and it doesn't have to be controversial. We should all be doing that as businesses anyways. Are we creating a safe, physically safe, emotionally safe? Are we creating a safe environment where people can do their best work? I think that would be the advice that I would give people. Listen, do a lot of listening. Have credible sources. Don't just make it up. Go find safety and health. We haven't used this, but I understand the Nebraska Safety and Health Council will come into your organization and help you figure it out, and they'll partner with you to put a program together so you're not on your own. Find other people that can help you, ask for advice, reach out to other organizations, brainstorm, and put a team together to figure out what you need to do.
Well, Chris Hill, Krista Prohaska, thank you so much for joining us today. I do want to mention that the third part of our series will be here. Join us next in 2 Wednesdays when we will be discussing re-entry communication. Thank you and be well.